On a bright northern morning, a Marine veteran and his loyal German shepherd walked into town, unaware destiny was already watching them. Families laughed, children played, and the air felt peaceful. Yet, something beneath that calm waited to break. Two missing children were being pulled deeper into danger, their silent plea trapped in a world too busy to notice. But sometimes, when every human eye fails, a dog's instinct becomes the only voice of truth. And in the middle of the crowd, the veteran's dog suddenly froze. Ears lifted, eyes locked, body trembling with warning. What he sensed next would unravel a secret no one expected and change the fate of a family forever. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories. Bright Hollow carried a strange kind of morning light. Bright but cold, like the sun itself was trying to warm the northern air, but couldn't quite melt the lingering breath of winter. The small town rested in a shallow valley framed by rows of tall fir trees, their needles still dusted with white from last night's frost. The roads glistened, coffee steam curled above paper cups as locals strolled the sidewalks, and the smell of warm waffles mixed with pine resin drifted lazily through the air. It was a peaceful morning, almost gentle, and yet it carried a quiet weight that no one recognized. Not yet. Sergeant Micah Rourke, at 35, walked with the calm gait of a man whose body had memorized both war and silence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-tanned skin from years under harsh deployment skies, and short, dark brown hair kept in strict military regulation. Trace silver threaded through his sideburns, a consequence of stress more than age. And his blue-gray eyes scanned the environment with the alertness of someone who had learned the cost of letting his guard down. Today, he wore his Marpat trousers and a weatherproof USMC jacket, sleeves pushed up just enough to show the faded scar running along his forearm, a souvenir from a rescue operation overseas. Most people found him courteous, steady, slightly intimidating, but approachable, especially when he had his partner beside him. Valor trotted at Micah's right side, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a sable black and gray coat that shone under the pale sun. His chest bore a bright, triangular patch of cream fur, and his eyes, warm amber with gold flecks, held a depth that made some people swear he understood entire conversations. He wore a black K9 harness with USMC K9 Valor stitched in thick thread. Normally he moved with balanced confidence, sometimes nudging children with his nose in a quiet greeting, sometimes circling Micah with a playful swagger. But not today. Today, Valor moved differently. Every few steps, the dog lifted his head, nostrils flaring, tail lowering, ears twitching toward the forest at the northern end of town. The wind blew from that direction, cold, sharp, carrying the crisp scent of snow and wet bark. Something else seemed to float in it, something that made Valor pause more than once. Weight shifting to his back legs, gaze fixed like a hunter sensing a tremor beneath the earth. Micah noticed it, of course. He always noticed. "Hey," he murmured, lowering his voice as they passed a booth selling blueberry pastries. "You picking up another fox or raccoon? Don't start anything before the event even begins." Valor didn't glance at him. He kept staring past the rooftops, past the church steeple, into the deep line of trees, far beyond what human sight could reach. His silence, his posture, tugged at something familiar inside Micah. That rare intuition, an echo of nights overseas where even the wind seemed to whisper warnings. "All right," Micah muttered under his breath, adjusting his gloves. Message received. "You're uneasy." Noted. But he didn't know why. Not yet. Bright Hollow's annual Family Day fair was already being set up in the center square. Banners in red and navy fluttered in the breeze. Vendors hammered tent poles into the ground. And families arrived early with toddlers bouncing in snow boots. The mayor, a round man with a ruddy face and the enthusiasm of a retired camp counselor, approached Micah with a broad smile. Sergeant Rourke, always a sight for sore eyes. He held out a hand, large, soft, enthusiastic. Glad the base could spare you this year. The families feel safer with you and your partner around. Micah shook his hand firmly. Happy to help, sir. The mayor bent down toward Valor, who, typically, would have wagged his tail. Instead, the dog simply stood still, alert, eyes drifting again toward the distant trees. The mayor blinked in mild confusion. Is he all right? He's fine, Micah said, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Probably just catching unfamiliar scents. Valor finally blinked, as if remembering social politeness, and lowered his head for the mayor to scratch briefly. But his body stayed rigid. Micah's eyes scanned the crowd automatically. People laughed, spilled hot cocoa, pulled children on small plastic sleds. Everything looked normal, ordinary, safe. And yet, as the cold wind brushed against his jaw, tugging at his collar, he felt something faint but unmistakable, a subtle tension crawling beneath the town's cheerful surface, like the first distant tremor before an avalanche. Deep in the forest at that same moment, two small silhouettes moved through the underbrush. Evan, 6 years old, walked with careful steps between the pines. He was lean, with tousled brown hair that curled slightly at the ends and a cautious intelligence in his round green eyes. His clothes didn't quite match the weather. A thin jacket, jeans with frayed knees, mismatched gloves. He held tightly to the hand of his younger sister. Lila, only 3, clutched a ragged stuffed rabbit missing one eye. Her hair was a soft, light brown with loose curls bouncing around her cheeks. She wore a little purple jacket zipped unevenly, and her breath puffed in fast, nervous clouds. She was a timid child, quiet, easily startled, and deeply attached to Evan, who often played the gentle protector since their father had left 2 years earlier and their mother worked double shifts. Almost there, Evan whispered, though his own voice trembled. Mom said to go straight to the library. I think this is the right way. But the forest trail looked unfamiliar. The branches too thick, the ground sloping in a direction he didn't expect. Lila's lower lip quivered. Evan, it's cold. He squeezed her hand. It's okay. Soon we'll see the town. The wind blew harder, rattling the branches above them. Neither child knew that this very breeze carried their faint scent all the way toward the town, toward Valor's waiting nose. Had anyone else walked near them, they might have seen 2 children simply taking the wrong path. But the forest had been quiet too long, and the world had a way of twisting on days when everything seemed harmless. Back in town, Micah walked the perimeter of the fairgrounds, mentally mapping exits, blind corners, and potential choke points. His instincts, sharpened by years in uniform, didn't quiet easily. Valor paused again, this time so suddenly that Micah had to stop mid-step. The dog's ears snapped upright, body leaning forward as if pulled by an invisible thread. Okay, that's enough, Micah murmured. What's going on with you? Valor took 1 step toward the north, then another, then stopped entirely. His head tilted sharply, an expression Micah had seen only a handful of times. Once in Helmand Province, once during a missing person search in Nevada, once outside a gas station where a frightened toddler had been hidden inside a stranger's car. Each time, Valor had reacted moments before danger revealed itself. Micah crouched beside him, pressing his gloved hand to the dog's shoulder. "You're making me nervous." Valor didn't blink. And then, without warning, he let out a low, quiet huff. Not a bark, not a growl. A single breathy sound, deep and solemn. The kind he expressed only when sensing fear. Not danger, fear. Micah straightened slowly, the muscles along his spine tightening. Just then, a faint noise drifted across the square, so soft that only someone already on edge would notice. Not a scream, not a shout, a small sound. A child's cry carried on the wind, swallowed almost instantly by the bustle of the festival. Micah's head snapped toward the forest. Valor was already staring there. For a heartbeat, neither moved. A quiet electricity passed between man and dog, instinct recognizing instinct. Something was wrong. Very wrong. But duty forced Micah to swallow his instinct for the moment. The fair hadn't fully opened. People were setting up, and he had to finish the initial safety sweep before he could wander off assigned ground. Regulations mattered. Procedure mattered. That didn't stop unease from crawling along the base of his skull with every step he took. A woman approached him with 2 steaming cups of cider. She introduced herself as Sarah Whitlow, a local baker in her early 40s with a warm, round face, kind hazel eyes, and long chestnut hair tied in a low ponytail. She wore a thick cream sweater under a brown vest dusted with flour, evidence of a rushed morning at her bakery. "Sergeant Rourke, right? The kids adore seeing a Marine here. You and your partner make us feel safer." Micah smiled politely. "Thank you, ma'am." But Sarah's gaze drifted to Valor. "He seems uneasy. Everything all right?" Micah hesitated. "I'm not sure. He's picking something up, but I don't know what." Sarah bit her lip, worry clouding her gentle features. "I heard 2 little ones went missing for a few hours last week near the North Ridge. Maybe—" Micah raised a hand slightly. "Rumors spread fast around here." Sarah nodded, but her expression didn't lighten. "Rumors start somewhere, Sergeant." The wind shifted again, colder this time. Valor lifted his head sharply, nostrils flaring in the direction of the forest, as if someone had whispered his name from the trees. Micah turned to follow his line of sight. Only the dark wall of pines stared back. But for the first time that morning, Micah felt it too. A wrongness, a tremor beneath the quiet. The day went on, the fair bustled louder, and laughter filled the streets of Bright Hollow. But the sunlight never warmed, and Valor never stopped watching the forest. And somewhere between those trees, 2 small figures kept walking. The northern edge of Bright Hollow looked different from the cheerful town center. Here the trees grew older, their trunks thick and furrowed like tired guardians leaning toward each other. The air smelled of cold sap and wet moss, and the deeper the forest stretched, the more the sunlight thinned into pale streaks caught between tangled branches. This was where Evan, a 6-year-old boy with bright green eyes and a thin, wiry frame, walked slowly along a narrow dirt trail. His dark brown hair, messy as always, peeked out from beneath a wool cap that didn't quite fit him. He wore a jacket that was too light for the northern chill. The zipper stuck halfway up, and the little backpack on his shoulders sagged with uneven weight. He held tightly to the small hand of his sister Lila. Lila was 3, tiny and soft-featured, with light brown curls that brushed her cheeks and wide hazel eyes that always seemed a breath away from tears. Her little purple coat was zipped crookedly, one mitten missing, small fingers turning pink from the cold. She clutched her one-eyed stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whisker, in the crook of her arm rubbing its worn fur against her cheek to comfort herself. She walked in uneven steps, boots too big, breath visible in tiny clouds that wavered with each shiver. They were supposed to meet their mother at the bright, hollow library after her shift ended. Their mother, Rachel Brower, was a thin, exhausted woman with honey-brown hair usually tied into a messy bun, and eyes that always darted between worry and tenderness when looking at her children. She worked 2 jobs: library assistant by day, diner waitress at night, and Evan knew she hated being late. He could imagine her standing under the warm yellow lights of the library entrance, wringing her hands, scanning the sidewalk for the shapes of her children. But she wasn't here. She wasn't anywhere on the trail. And the forest was growing colder. "Do you think we're going the right way?" Evan whispered, chewing on his lower lip like he always did when thinking too hard. Lila tugged at his sleeve instead of answering. "My hands are cold," she mumbled. The wind brushed against their faces, brushing pine needles across the ground. They should have turned back. They should have stayed near the library. They should have waited. But children don't always understand how quickly the world can change. A sudden crunch of footsteps echoed from behind them. Evan stiffened, turning around sharply. Lila pressed closer, clutching Mr. Whisker tighter. A man stepped forward from the shadows of the trees. He wore a thick gray coat that looked expensive, its collar brushed with faint frost. His dark trousers were clean, his shoes polished, strangely formal for a cold forest morning. His hair was black and slicked back neatly, and though the forest was dim under the branches, he wore dark-tinted glasses that hid his eyes. His face was angular, jaw tight, cheekbones sharp as if carved from stone. His expression was calm, composed, too composed for someone casually strolling alone in the woods. "Hello there," he said, voice smooth, soft, but commanding, like someone used to being obeyed. "You too must be freezing. What are you doing out here alone?" Evan's heart thumped once, painfully. Mom had told him countless times, "Don't talk to strangers." But the stranger didn't look like the danger described in bedtime warnings. He looked like someone from an office building, like someone who might be picking up his own kids from school. Still, something about him felt off. A little too perfect. A little too rehearsed. We're going to meet our mom," Evan stuttered, tightening his grip on Lila's hand. Layla's eyes locked onto the stranger's shoes instead of his face. The man crouched slightly, but kept a careful distance. "Rachel Brower's kids, right?" His tone was confident, as if stating a fact instead of asking. Evan's stomach dropped. "How do you know my mom's name?" The man's smile widened, but didn't warm. "She asked me to pick you up. She got caught in a meeting at the library. You know how it is. Busy adults." Evan's breath hitched. His mom hated meetings. She said they wasted time she didn't have. Something was wrong, very wrong. But before he could gather his thoughts, Lila whined softly, her voice trembling. "Evan, my hands hurt." She tugged his arm weakly and leaned against him. Her cheeks were flushed red from the cold. The stranger took a single step forward, slowly, carefully, as if not to scare them. "How about this?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a bright red lollipop. The kind that sparkled under light, the kind children gravitated to. "A treat to warm your spirits." Evan froze. His mind screamed no. His body didn't move. All it took was that single moment of hesitation. Lila's eyes widened at the candy. Her stomach growled audibly. And in Evan's paralysis, she reached out a tiny hand toward it, only for Evan to pull her back quickly. "No," he snapped, surprising himself. We need to go. Mom wouldn't. But the stranger didn't flinch at the rejection. Instead, he slowly lowered the lollipop, his expression unreadable behind his dark glasses. Then he smiled again, smooth, patient. It's all right. You're scared. That's normal. But I promise, she really did ask me. He extended his free hand not to the children, but toward the path behind him. The car's this way, nice and warm. Evan swallowed hard. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. He knew something was wrong. Every instinct he had screamed to run. But Lila swayed on her feet. Her lips were turning blue. She had been quiet for too long. The man stepped closer and gently closed his fingers around Evan's wrist. His grip was firm, too firm, and cold, as though he'd been waiting in the shadows much longer than he admitted. Evan yanked back instinctively. Let go! The man didn't. His polite facade slipped for a single second, just long enough for Evan to see the gleam of impatience, maybe even anger beneath it. Then the smile returned, smoother than before. Come now. Your mom needs you both. Don't make this harder. He took Lila's hand as well, gripping her small fingers with an ease that made Evan's stomach churn with dread. Layla whimpered, clutching her rabbit tighter with her free hand. The stranger led them toward the parking area on the edge of the forest. Evan walked stiffly, each step feeling like he was sinking deeper into something he didn't understand. He looked around desperately, hoping someone, anyone, would appear. But the trees stood silent, the forest holding its breath. Halfway to the parking lot, Lila tugged Evan's sleeve and whispered, tears glossing her lashes. Evan. Mr. Whisker fell. Her stuffed rabbit was gone, lost somewhere on the path. Panic flared in her chest, and her voice cracked. I want Mr. Whisker. Evan turned around, searching the ground behind them. He didn't see the rabbit, but he saw something else. The man guiding them had stopped walking, just for a moment, and reached the car parked near the tree line. He pulled a set of keys from his pocket and clicked the lock. The door's locked, but from the outside. Evan's entire body went cold. Why would someone lock a car from outside before children were inside it? The stranger's jaw tightened. Evan felt the truth slam into him. They were not going to the library. This man did not work with their mother, and they had just walked past their one chance, maybe their only chance, to escape. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. The door of the gray SUV creaked open. Evan squeezed Lila's hand, heart pounding so violently he felt it in his throat. It's too late, he whispered. Because it was. Very, very late. The Bright Hollow Family Day Fair was now at full bloom. Music from local bands drifted through the square. Guitars twanging, drums thumping, children's laughter rising and falling like waves. The smell of caramel apples and roasted nuts curled in the air, and colorful ribbons tied along the railings fluttered in the restless northern wind. People moved in clusters across the plaza. Families, teenagers, old couples walking hand in hand. It was the kind of cheerful chaos that made a town feel alive. But Sergeant Micah Rourke didn't relax. Not really. He stood near a booth selling handmade pottery, doing his second sweep of the area. His tall frame cast a long shadow over the cobblestones as he took in every corner. Exits, blind spots, any unfamiliar faces. His blue-gray eyes, calm but always calculating, never stopped moving. And beside him, Valor walked with a quiet tension in his gait. Valor's sable coat bristled slightly under his harness, and he kept his head high, nostrils flaring periodically as though sorting through scents only he could read. From a distance, people saw a disciplined K9, impressive and majestic. But but Micah saw what others could not. Something in Valor's posture had shifted. The dog's tail held lower than usual, his breathing more precise, controlled, purposeful. Micah whispered, "Easy, boy. Just a crowd. Nothing strange yet." But Valor didn't agree. As they neared the children's play area, a cluster of booths with games, balloons, and bright decorations, Valor suddenly halted mid-step. He didn't freeze like a statue. It was sharper, more immediate, as if something invisible punched into his instincts. His ears shot up, his head lowered slightly, and a deep, almost inaudible rumble vibrated through his chest. Micah's brows knitted. Valor only made that sound when he sensed a child's fear. What is it? Micah followed Valor's gaze, scanning the crowd. Adults chatted, kids ran, cotton candy sticks waved through the air. Nothing looked out of place. But Valor stared intensely at a point near the balloon station, his amber eyes cutting through the sea of motion. And at that same moment, pushed by the crowd, Evan and Lila emerged into view. Their hands were tightly held by the man in the gray coat. Evan looked small and tense, his thin frame stiffened with suspicion, green eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Lila, tiny and trembling, clutched his hand and her patched sleeve. Her curls stuck to her damp cheeks, and she pressed her lips together as if holding in a cry. The man beside them, now under full daylight, seemed even more out of place. His slicked-back black hair didn't move, despite the wind. His gray coat looked pristine, the fabric too smooth, too clean for someone who had supposedly walked through the forest. His dark glasses hid his eyes, leaving only his thin-lipped smile visible as he navigated them through the crowd. A few parents stepped aside politely, assuming he was their guardian. Evan looked around desperately. He had learned a safety signal at school, a silent call for help. But his memory scrambled under fear. Should he close his fingers? Open them? Raise the hand slowly or quickly? He hated himself for not remembering. The world swirled around him, too loud, too bright, too strange. He tried anyway. He lifted his hand, palm outward, thumb slightly bent inward. Then, uncertain, he curled one finger in. A little girl passing by giggled. "Do you want a balloon?" Evan lowered his hand instantly, cheeks burning with panic and shame. But he didn't have time to try again. The man tightened his grip. Micah didn't see the gesture, but Valor did. The dog's head jerked to the side. His body tensed like a wire pulled taut. He inhaled sharply, once, twice. And then, as if a switch flipped inside him, Valor lunged forward with such force that the leash strained violently. Micah staggered a half step. "Whoa, Valor, easy. What's gotten?" But Valor didn't slow. He tugged with everything he had toward the two children in the sea of people. Micah tightened his grip instinctively, but Valor kept pulling, claws scraping the pavement, muscles bunching beneath his coat. "Valor," Micah hissed. "Heel, come on, talk to me. What do you smell?" Valor's answer was wordless. Another sharp pull, stronger than the last. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He followed. Micah pushed through the crowd, weaving between strollers and clusters of families. People turned their heads at the sight, a Marine K9 barreling through the festival, dragging his handler with fierce determination. Valor's tail was stiff, his pupils narrowed. A low growl vibrated behind his teeth. He was no longer the calm guardian of the festival. He had become something else entirely. A protector reacting to fear, not his own. As they neared the balloon stand, Micah's eyes finally landed on the two children, a small boy, a little girl, and a man holding their wrists too tightly. Micah's breath caught in his chest, instincts firing. Just then, Valor did something Micah had only seen twice in their entire partnership. He stopped dead, lifted his head, and let out a soft, mournful whine, a sound so fragile it felt like a plea rather than a warning. Micah froze. Valor whined only when he sensed a child who desperately wanted to scream but couldn't. And as that soft sound carried through the crowd, Lila's head turned sharply, as if she had heard something no one else had. Her wide hazel eyes locked onto Valor, and for a fleeting moment, all the noise around them seemed to quiet. Her little lips parted, and her fingers tightened around Evan's hand. It wasn't fear in her eyes this time. It was hope. Micah felt something cold and electric slide down his spine. What had these kids walked through before reaching this square? The man in the gray coat noticed Valor first. His smile faltered, only slightly, but enough for Micah to see the edges crack. He adjusted his grip on the children and changed direction, subtly angling toward the side exit of the plaza. But subtlety wasn't subtle enough. Valor gave a deep bark, a thunderous sound that turned heads and scattered a group of teenagers nearby. The man flinched. Evan flinched harder. Micah raised a hand, stepping closer with calm authority. "Sir," he called out in a firm voice, "hold on a moment." The man did not turn. Instead, he tightened his fingers around the children's wrists. Evan winced. Lila whimpered. Micah stepped faster. "Sir, Marine personnel, I need a moment of your time." The man finally turned, forcing a smooth expression, lips curling into a polite, too polite smile. Up close, Micah could see his skin clearly. Pale, smooth, almost waxy, as if he spent too much time indoors. No ruggedness, no outdoor texture, the kind of face that didn't belong anywhere near a forest. "Is something wrong, officer?" he asked gently. Micah didn't correct him. "Mind telling me where you're headed with the kids?" The man's jaw twitched once before he quickly composed himself. "They're my niece and nephew. I'm taking them to get their coats from the car." Evan looked up at Micah. His lips parted, his eyes begged. Micah knelt slightly, lowering his voice to a child-friendly tone. "Hey there, buddy. You two doing okay?" The man cut in quickly. "They're just tired." But Evan swallowed hard, mustered courage from someplace deep, and lifted his hand again. The same half-correct, half-wrong gesture. Micah stared at it, puzzled, recognizing it, but not fully. He glanced at Valor, who had gone still, eyes locked on the boy's trembling fingers. Then Micah understood. His pulse spiked. "Sir," he said sharply, rising to full height, "I need you to release the children." The man's smile vanished. He stepped backward, toward the side exit of the plaza. "No," Micah snapped. "Don't move." The man moved anyway. Valor exploded into a sprint. Micah held the leash, but Valor's momentum ripped through his arm, pulling him into motion. Tables rattled, families gasped, Lila shrieked. The man spun around, dragging the children with him, trying to shove through the crowd. "Stop!" Micah shouted. "Let them go!" But the man shoved a group of teenagers aside and forced himself into the narrow passage between two booths. Valor darted around the left side, anticipating him. Micah followed close behind, adrenaline roaring through his chest. The gray-coated man turned his head once, just once, and Micah caught a flicker in his expression. Something sharp and dangerous that had nothing to do with fear. Something colder. Something planned. Then he pulled Evan and Lila into a run, shoving past startled civilians, heading toward the direction that led, as Micah now realized, straight to the parking lots, and straight toward the forests, where no one would hear a child scream. The chase had begun. The crowd had thickened into a restless river of sound. Children shrieking with delight, vendors calling out specials, balloons bobbing against the sky. The play area was a maze of color and motion, and under normal circumstances, Micah would have admired how Bright Hollow came alive during community events. But not today. Not when every instinct he carried, every lesson carved into him by years of service, screamed that something inside this cheerful mess was dangerously wrong. Valor led the charge, weaving through clusters of families with surgical precision. His paws struck the cobblestones with sharp, rapid taps, the muscles along his shoulders rolling like coiled springs under his sable coat. His amber eyes locked on a single point in the crowd, unblinking. Micah followed, breath tight in his chest, one hand hovering near his utility belt. Then, as if guided by an invisible line, Valor stopped dead in front of the man in the gray coat. The man was even more conspicuous up close. His posture was erect, too rigid for a casual family outing. His gray coat fell cleanly against his frame, almost too pristine despite the rough terrain he had supposedly walked through. His hair, slicked tightly against his scalp, didn't shift even as the wind pressed against the fairground. Behind his dark-tinted glasses, it was impossible to read his eyes. But the shape of his smile said enough. It was wrong. Too still. Too controlled. "Beautiful dog," he said softly, his voice an airy whisper meant only for Micah's ears. But the smile didn't reach the muscles around his mouth. Lila whimpered and pressed herself against Evan. The tiny girl trembled violently. Cold or fear, Micah couldn't tell. Evan, with his thin frame and frightened green eyes, lifted his hand again, nervous, awkward, but more deliberate this time. His fingers extended, curled inward slowly, exactly like the silent signal for danger they were taught in school. Valor reacted instantly. He barked, a single sharp, explosive sound, the kind that sliced through the noise like shattered glass. Parents jerked around. Kids stopped mid-step. Even nearby vendors froze. Micah stepped forward, every muscle taut. "Sir," he said, his tone calm but iron-willed, "I need to check on these kids." The man's fingers tightened around Evan's wrist, squeezing hard enough for the boy to gasp in pain. Micah saw the wince, the way Evan's shoulders crumpled inward, small but unmistakable. That was all he needed. He raised a hand, signaling the man to release them. But instead of letting go, the man's smile changed. It curved upward just a little, not kindly, not nervously, but knowingly, as if this moment had been inevitable, as if he'd been waiting for someone like Micah to intervene. Micah's pulse spiked. Why isn't he running? Why act like he's in control? Before Micah could speak again, the man leaned down ever so slightly, his cold breath brushing Evan's ear. Evan stiffened, then paled to a ghostly white. Micah caught the whisper. Barely. "Don't think I don't have a backup plan," the man murmured. A backup plan. The word slid under Micah's skin like ice. Evan trembled violently, fear flooding his eyes, and Lila clung to him as if her life depended on it. Valor's low growl deepened, vibrating beneath his chest like distant thunder. Micah moved his foot forward, widening his stance, tightening the leash in his hand. Everything inside him focused, sharpened, the way it always did in the split second before chaos. "Let them go," Micah said again, voice harder this time. The man tilted his head slowly, his expression unreadable. "Marine, you're misunderstanding. They're just scared of the crowd." "No," Micah replied, steady and cold. "They're scared of you." Just then, a balloon popped in the distance. Loud, sharp, unexpected. Most children flinched and giggled, but the man in the gray coat reacted differently. His hand jerked reflexively toward his jacket pocket, fingers brushing something hidden beneath the fabric. His body tightened, shoulders rising, jaw clenching. Micah saw it. Valor saw it. But more disturbingly, Lila saw it too. Her big hazel eyes widened, and for the first time she made a sound louder than a whimper. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a cry. It was a tiny, gasping word, barely formed by her trembling lips. No. That single word, fragile but instinctive, hung between them. Micah's heart dropped. What had this man done that even a 3-year-old sensed a deeper terror at the sight of his hidden pocket? The noise of the balloon faded, but the stranger's mask had slipped. His smile straightened abruptly into a flat line, the facade cracking like thin ice. His grip on the children tightened, too tight now, aggressive, panicked. He stepped backward, dragging both children with him. Micah acted instantly. He stepped forward, blocking the narrow walkway between 2 booths. His shadow fell across the man, and his blue-gray eyes hardened. "You're done. Release the kids now." The man's breathing quickened, and for the first time, a flicker of anger flared across his face. He tugged Evan closer, nearly knocking the boy off balance. "You don't understand," he hissed. "You have no idea what's coming." Micah's jaw clenched. "Try me." The man's lips twitched into a twisted half grin. "You think you're saving them. You're late. You're always late." Always late. A strange accusation. Micah didn't have time to wonder what it meant, because the man suddenly pushed into the crowd, forcing a path toward the side exit. Children stumbled out of the way, startled. Cotton candy sticks fell. Parents shouted. Evan tripped, nearly falling, but the man jerked him upright by sheer force. Valor lunged, claws scraping the pavement, bark erupting like a warning shot. Micah shoved through the crowd, hand near his utility belt. "Stop! Marine personnel! Let the children go!" But the man used the chaos, shoving between booths, dragging the children at a brutal pace. He turned sharply around the corner of a lemonade stand and nearly collided with a vendor carrying a tray. The vendor, Marcus Haynes, a bearded man in his mid-30s with a stocky build, flour-dusted apron, and kind brown eyes, stumbled. His tray of soda cups splashed across the pavement. Marcus blinked in confusion. He wasn't used to violence. He ran a small bakery kiosk every year at the fair, known for being gentle and mild-mannered. But when he saw Evan's terrified face, something changed. His brows furrowed, and he instinctively stepped between the man and the exit. "Hey, what are you doing with those kids?" His voice, normally calm, cracked with alarm. The man shoved him so hard Marcus hit the booth behind him, knocking down a stack of cookie boxes. He groaned and slumped forward, dazed but conscious. Micah felt fury burn through his chest. But he didn't have time to check on Marcus. He sprinted after the stranger, pushing aside a rope barrier. The side exit led toward the parking lots and the forest, the worst possible direction. Valor ran ahead, muscles firing in perfect coordination. His tail was stiff, ears forward, eyes burning with a protective rage Micah had only seen a handful of times. This wasn't a dog chasing a suspect. This was a guardian chasing a threat to a child. The man in the gray coat made it to the wooden archway marking the edge of the fairgrounds. Beyond it lay the sloped gravel path toward the cars. He dragged the children faster. Evan stumbled, scraping his knee on the ground. Lila cried, her small voice carrying helplessly across the path. "Let them go!" Micah roared. The man stopped just long enough to look back over his shoulder. His lips pulled into a cold smile. "You should have stayed out of this." Then he turned and ran. And the 3 bodies, 2 small, one monstrous, vanished down the path toward the parking lot. Micah and Valor gave chase. The fight for the children had only begun. The gravel path sloped downward from the fairground toward the lower parking lot, where only a handful of dim yellow lights flickered under the early afternoon clouds. The laughter and music from the festival felt miles away now, muffled by distance and fear. Here the wind carried a colder bite, sweeping dust across cracked asphalt and rattling a loose shopping cart abandoned near the fence line. The man in the gray coat yanked Evan and Lila forward with a brutality he had not shown in the crowded plaza. His polite mask was gone, ripped away by urgency. His jaw clenched tightly, the veins along his neck bulging with panic, and his grip around the children was no longer disguised as protective. It was violent, desperate. Evan stumbled as the man pulled him, and Lila, her tiny legs unable to keep pace, tripped over the uneven asphalt and fell hard onto her knees. The man whipped around, eyes blazing behind those tinted glasses. "Stand up," he barked. Evan dropped to his knees to lift her, panic flooding his small face. "Lila, come on, please. You have to get up." Lila whimpered, her voice a fragile thread. "My knee. Evan, it hurts." But the man did not care. He grabbed the back of Evan's jacket and lifted him off the ground with a jerk. "I said move!" Footsteps thundered behind him. Micah, charging. The Marine's boots pounded across the pavement, each stride fueled by fury and fear. Micah was fast. Years of training and survival sharpened every movement, but Valor was faster. The German shepherd shot ahead like an arrow, tail stiff, eyes burning with fierce purpose. "Valor, hold!" Micah commanded, but Valor only partially obeyed. He slowed enough to stay coordinated with Micah, but the determination in his posture made one thing clear. If that man hurt the children, nothing on earth would stop him. The man dragged Evan and Lila toward a dark corner of the lot, and that was when Micah saw it. Not one car, not one man. A large dark van sat under the weakest street light, paint scratched, windows tinted black. No license plates. The kind of vehicle built to disappear. As Micah skidded to a halt, the rear doors swung open with a metallic slam. Inside the van stood another figure, tall, looming, wearing a black hoodie pulled so low that only the shadow of a face could be seen. Their posture was stiff, their shoulders sharp, like a predator perched and waiting. The hoodie figure didn't speak, didn't gesture, just watched with chilling stillness. Micah's blood went cold. This wasn't one man operating alone. This was a planned abduction, a coordinated group. Valor growled low, hackles rising along his back like bristled thorns. "Don't come closer," the man in the gray coat shouted. His voice had cracked, finally revealing the strain. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "You're right," Micah said, his voice like steel. "I don't know yet, but I'm about to." The man hauled the children closer to the van. Evan's face crumpled with fear. Lila's tears streaked down her cheeks. Micah's heart twisted painfully at the sight. He took one step forward, and Evan suddenly looked straight at him. Micah froze. The boy's trembling stopped for just a moment. His shoulders lifted, his eyes, wide and glassy with fear, locked onto Micah's and held. Something wordless passed between them. Fear, yes, but also hope. Then Evan lifted his hand, palm out, fingers pressed tightly together, thumb folded across the palm, a perfect, unmistakable distress signal. This time, there was no hesitation, no confusion, no half measures. It was a signal delivered like a message written in destiny. Valor reacted instantly, leaping forward with a force that nearly tore the leash from Micah's grip. His bark blasted across the parking lot, echoing off metal and concrete. "Valor, wait!" Micah's voice broke mid-command. Too late. The man dragged the children to the van, shoving Evan upward toward the open door. "Go, now!" he shouted to the hooded figure inside. The hooded figure leaned forward, revealing a sliver of pale chin, a thin mouth, and the suggestion of deep scars along the jawline. Jagged and old, like a history carved into the skin rather than healed. Their hand extended silently. Evan screamed. Lila sobbed. The man shoved them closer. And then, the van tried to start. The engine gave a sharp metallic whine, sputtering like a wounded animal. Then choked. Then died. The man froze. The hooded figure inside stiffened, confusion cracking their silence. The van made another attempt, its engine rumbling, coughing, trembling, and failing again. A chilling thought crossed Micah's mind. Is it just a mechanical issue? Or did someone sabotage it? Or is something else stopping them? Not luck, not chance, something else. Something that, for the first time, put uncertainty and fear into the man's eyes. The hooded figure leaned out of the van again, their voice rasping like gravel dragged across metal. "It won't start," they hissed. Their tone held something Micah didn't expect. Panic. The man in the gray coat punched the side of the van with a clenched fist. "You said this thing was tested." "It was." The hooded figure spat. "This is impossible." A sudden gust of wind ripped through the parking lot, slamming the van's door against its frame with a violent clang. The hooded figure recoiled in shock. Evan's hair blew back across his forehead, and Lila grasped Evan's arm tightly. Then Valor growled. Not a warning growl. A low, guttural, bone-deep sound Micah had heard only one other time. On the day Valor saved 3 Marines from a collapsed building by detecting unstable debris seconds before it fell. Valor sensed danger that humans could not yet see. Micah's pulse quickened. Something about this moment wasn't natural. Not the wind, not the engine, not the fear in the children's eyes. Something unseen hovered at the edge of all of it, like fate tightening its grip. And Micah felt it too. "Move," the man screamed, trying to shove Evan inside. But the van's engine, as if rebelling against him, let out one last groaning attempt, then died completely. Silence fell, a heavy, suffocating silence. Then Micah stepped forward. "It's over?" The man snarled. "No, we're not done." He reached into his coat. Micah moved instantly. "Valor!" Valor exploded into action like a cannon shot, leaping straight at the man. The gray-coated man released Evan, stumbling backward as Valor slammed into him with enough force to knock him off balance. The hooded figure lunged forward from inside the van, reaching for Lila, only for Micah to intercept, blocking them with his full weight. The figure stumbled back as Micah drove his shoulder into them, their hood slipping just enough to show part of their face beneath. A scarred cheek, a sunken eye, a twisted expression of fury. Micah grabbed Lila, pulling her against his chest. "I've got you." Evan scrambled toward Valor, who now pinned the man to the ground, snarling inches from his throat. The man snarled back, twisted, furious. "You think this ends with me?" "No," Micah growled. "It ends now." The children cried, clinging to Micah as he backed away from the van. Valor held his stance, muscles tight, teeth bared, waiting for Micah's command. And the hooded figure, staggering inside the useless van, glared at them with a hatred that promised the story was far from finished. But for now, Micah had the children. Valor had the suspect pinned. And the van, their escape, their plan, their entire operation, was dead in the water. The confrontation had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. Sirens tore through the cold air as two police cruisers raced down the gravel path toward the dim parking lot. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the metal siding of the useless van, flickering across discarded candy wrappers and scattered gravel. Officers jumped out before the cars had fully stopped, boots pounding the ground, hands on holsters, voices sharp with practiced urgency. Within seconds, the man in the gray coat was surrounded. He didn't resist at first, maybe because valor still had him pinned, the dog's jaws hovering just inches from his throat. The man's chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. His expensive coat was streaked with dirt, the collar pulled askew, and his slicked-back hair had begun to unravel from sweat and panic. Even behind his tinted glasses, it was clear his composure had shattered. "Get him!" an officer shouted. Micah snapped, "Valor, back!" The German shepherd released instantly, stepping aside but staying low and ready, growl still rumbling in his chest. Two officers tackled the man, slamming him onto the asphalt. They twisted his arms behind his back, cuffing him while he muttered curses and incoherent threats. One officer, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a salt and pepper beard and weathered skin, held him down with a knee. This was Deputy Marshal, known for his no-nonsense approach and deep baritone voice that carried authority without trying. "Try anything," Marshal growled, tightening the cuffs, "and I'll make sure your face meets the pavement again." The man only hissed in response. Meanwhile, the hooded figure, the second suspect, had vanished into the line of thick pines bordering the lot. A few officers sprinted after him, flashlights slicing through the trees, but it was clear he knew the forest well. His footsteps faded into the darkness with alarming speed. Micah held Lila in his arms, her tiny fingers still clutching his uniform sleeve. Evan stood pressed against Micah's leg, trembling, breathing in short bursts. Both children were pale, shaken, but alive. "You're okay," Micah murmured. "I've got you, both of you. You're safe now." Valor stood beside them, his posture protective, back slightly arched, tail down, head forward. Though the immediate danger had passed, his instincts had not relaxed. His amber eyes stayed trained on the tree line, watching, waiting, anticipating. Paramedic lights flickered as a medical team arrived. A woman in light blue scrubs, Nurse Danielle Rowe, tall and willowy with chestnut hair tied in a loose braid, knelt beside them. Her voice was gentle but firm, the kind that could calm anyone from a panicked child to a frantic adult. "Sweethearts," she said softly, "I'm going to check your hands, okay? Make sure you didn't hurt yourselves." Her presence soothed Lila, who let out a fragile sob and allowed Danielle to dab the blood on her scraped knee. Evan held his sister's hand, the entire time, refusing to let go. Micah rose as officers began examining the van. He stepped closer, Valor pacing beside him. "What do we have?" Micah asked Deputy Marshal. Marshal rubbed his jaw, expression darkening. A whole lot of trouble. Inside the van were scattered papers, duffel bags, zip ties, and a faint chemical smell that made Micah's skin crawl. One officer, Officer Reed, a slim, freckled younger man with nervous energy, shone his flashlight across the back interior. "Sir, you need to see this." Micah climbed inside. His breath stilled. A list of children's names printed on loose sheets lay across the floor. Names from several nearby towns, some crossed out, some circled. Ages as young as 2, as old as 11. Micah's fingers tightened. "Dear God." Officer Reed swallowed. "That's not all." He lifted a folded map, sharp creases, dirty edges, dotted with ink marks. Several towns were circled. And Bright Hollow had been marked not today, not last week, but 3 months ago, Reed said quietly. They planned this. Micah felt something cold settle deep in his chest. 3 months. These kidnappers didn't stumble upon Evan and Lila. They had been preparing. Then Reed picked up a single torn sheet, covered in oddly precise, hand-drawn shapes. Centered on the page was a peculiar symbol, a palm drawn in charcoal, but the fingers were positioned strangely, one bent inward at an unnatural angle. Micah's breath caught. It looked exactly like Evan's first imperfect distress signal. Not the correct one Evan gave perfectly later, but the first one. The half-wrong, half-right gesture. Micah whispered, "What is this?" Reed shook his head. "Sir, we found it taped to the wall inside the van." Micah stared at the paper, mind racing. Did Evan see this symbol somewhere before? Was it planted in places children might see, or worse? Did someone try to teach it to him indirectly? Why would kidnappers use a distortion of a help signal? Valor nudged the paper with his nose, whined softly, tail lowering. Micah looked at him. "What is it, buddy?" Valor didn't answer, but he stared toward the forest again, toward the direction the second man fled. Something was wrong at a level they hadn't yet understood. As paramedics led the children toward the ambulance, Evan tugged impatiently at Micah's sleeve. His face was pale but determined. "Sergeant," he whispered shakily, "there's something I have to tell you." Micah knelt. "Go ahead." Evan swallowed, eyes filling with tears he refused to let spill. "The man, the one with the glasses, he said they only needed Lila." Micah felt his muscles tense. Evan's next words struck like ice through the spine. "He said I was just to distract people, that I was only there so nobody would look at her." Lila clung to Evan tighter at the memory. Micah felt something deep, primal, and furious ignite in his chest. Only wanted Lila, not Evan. Why? Why target a specific child? What made her the one they needed? Micah placed both hands on Evan's shoulders. "You tell me if you heard anything else, anything at all. I promise, I'll believe you." Evan nodded slowly. Then he whispered the final piece. He said, "They've been watching us for a long time." The world seemed to still around them. Even Valor froze, head snapping toward Evan with unnerving precision, as if the dog understood every word. Micah's pulse hammered in his ears. A group, a plan made months ago, a symbol tied to a distorted version of a safety signal, and a child they needed. There was more to this than anyone had realized. And the second suspect, the one inside the van, was still out there. Back at the van, Deputy Marshal slammed the door shut. "We'll get crime scene and the feds involved. This isn't small-town crime, not anymore." Micah nodded grimly. "No, it's not." Valor pressed against his leg, muscles stiff, eyes still locked on the forest shadows. The danger wasn't over, not by a long shot. The chapter closed with the children safe, the first suspect caught, and the van secured. But the second suspect, and the reason they wanted Lila, remained a terrifying mystery. Night settled over Bright Hollow with an uneasy quiet, the kind that felt too soft, too still for a town that had just brushed against something dark. The streetlights glowed in warm amber circles, snow dust drifting down from a sky the color of deep slate. The fairground was already shutting down, but the echoes of earlier chaos still hung in the air like smoke. Inside the temporary medical tent set up near the square, Evan and Lila sat wrapped in blankets, cheeks streaked with dried tears. Their mother, Rachel Brower, dropped to her knees the second she reached them. Rachel, thin, exhausted, honey-brown hair unraveling from its bun, crushed both children against her chest as though trying to fuse all three of their hearts together again. Her voice cracked with desperate relief. My babies. My babies. I thought I lost you. Evan clung to her with a fierceness he didn't know he had. Lila, shaking uncontrollably, buried her face into her mother's sweater and sobbed with small, trembling breaths. The three of them huddled there, a fragile knot of love barely holding together after almost unraveling forever. A few feet away, Valor sat like a silent guardian, his ears upright, tail resting gently across his paws, eyes glowing warm and watchful. The dog's presence felt like a barrier between the family and the rest of the world, as though he had expanded himself to fill every corner between danger and safety. Children sometimes called him the big angel dog, and tonight it felt truer than ever. Micah stood beside them, hands resting lightly on his utility belt, shoulders finally lowering from combat readiness into something softer, more human. The Marine's face remained composed. Strong jawline, blue-gray eyes, calm as steel. But he felt a weight inside him he couldn't place. Relief, yes. Gratitude. But something else, too. Something colder. Something unfinished. Deputy Marshal approached, holding a radio still buzzing faintly with incoming chatter. His square face was grave beneath the glow of the tense overhead lights. "Rourke," he said, lowering his voice. "We got an ID on the one who ran." Micah straightened. "And?" Marshall blew out a breath. "He's no nobody. Name's Calder Finn. Federal warrant out for interstate abductions for..." He paused, glancing at the two children hugging their mother. "For targeting young kids. High-value networks involved. Organized. Smart. Careful. The kind that doesn't miss, unless something gets in their way." Micah glanced at Valor, who lifted his head, ears twitching as if he sensed they were talking about the darkness he'd already smelled. Rachel looked up, fear returning to her tired eyes. "They're not coming back, are they?" Marshall didn't answer immediately. Micah stepped in, voice steady. "Not tonight. Not with all these officers around. You're safe." But even as he said it, he felt the truth twist in his chest. Safe for now wasn't the same as safe forever. Behind them, the man in the gray coat, now cuffed and shoved into the back of a cruiser, twisted in his seat. His tinted glasses were gone, revealing cold, calculating eyes that never blinked. The moment he saw Micah looking, he smiled, a thin, cruel smile. And then he spoke, voice muffled through the car window, but clear enough to cut through the night. "You saved these two, but you won't save them all." Bright hollow. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the glass. "Is only the beginning." Micah's jaw locked. "Get him out of here," he told the officers. As the cruiser drove away, red and blue lights flashing against the frost-dark sky, Micah felt a tremor roll through his chest. Not fear, a warning, like the echo of a stronger storm far beyond the horizon. Later that night, after the tent closed and families were escorted home, Micah walked with Valor toward the edge of the parking lot. Frost formed delicate webs across the grass. The van had been towed, but the sense of something unfinished still hung like a shadow behind every light post. Micah exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Sleep felt impossible. The man's last words clung to his mind like burr thorns. Only the beginning. Valor sat beside him, tail resting lightly across Micah's boot. The dog looked calm, but every so often his ears twitching, like he was tracking a sound Micah couldn't hear, a frequency too faint, too distant for humans. A whisper on the wind. "You hear something, buddy?" Micah murmured. Valor didn't move, only stared into the tree line, eyes narrowing. A long, quiet breath escaped him, almost mournful. Micah's spine prickled. "Yeah, I hear it too." Inside Rachel's small attic bedroom, Evan sat cross-legged on the wooden floor with a dim lamp casting warm light across scattered toys and dusty boxes. He should have been asleep. Lila was curled in their mother's arms downstairs, finally resting after hours of tears. But Evan couldn't sleep, not with questions clawing at him. He opened his little backpack, the same one the man in the gray coat had grabbed earlier. He rummaged through it, snacks, a crayon, a folded drawing. But then, a paper he didn't recognize. A single, narrow sheet tucked deep in a pocket he didn't remember opening. Evan's heart froze. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. In the dim attic light lay a symbol drawn in charcoal, the same distorted palm shape Micah found inside the van. The same half-right, half-wrong gesture Evan had made without understanding why. His breath hitched. Beneath it, scrawled in jagged, uneven handwriting, were the words, "Next time won't be this easy." Evan felt his throat tighten. His small heartbeat hammered against his ribs. He wanted to scream, but something deep inside him whispered that making noise might be a mistake. He folded the note again, slowly, carefully. Valor, downstairs but directly beneath. The attic let out a sudden low growl, like he felt the danger, like he sensed a message in the dark. A soft tapping sound hit the attic window. Evan spun around, breath catching. The window was fogged over from the cold. Through the blur, he thought, just for a moment, that he saw a shape standing far out by the tree line. Tall, still, watching. He blinked. The shape vanished, but the fog on the inside of the glass carried a single small fingerprint smudge he didn't remember touching. Valor barked once, sharp, urgent. Rachel called up the stairs. "Evan, honey, you okay?" He looked at the paper in his hand. He wasn't sure how to answer. Downstairs, Micah stood by the doorway, arms folded. Rachel sat with Lila sleeping against her chest, exhaustion softening her features. She looked up when Micah approached. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You and Valor saved them." Micah shook his head lightly. "They're strong kids. And Valor, well, he knew something none of us did." As if on cue, Valor padded over, nudging Micah's leg before resting his head near Rachel's feet, guarding even in stillness. Rachel's eyes glistened. "Will they come back?" Micah didn't lie. "I think the group behind this will try again, but not tonight, and not while we're watching." Rachel nodded, fear clinging to her breath like frost. Micah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You won't be alone in this. I promise." Upstairs, Evan folded the mysterious paper and hid it beneath his pillow. Heart heavy, mind racing. Outside, wind swept across Bright Hollow, brushing through rooftops and creaking across fences like a whispered warning. Tonight was supposed to be an ending. But as Micah looked at the sleeping children, and as Valor lifted his head sharply at another distant sound, it was clear this was something else entirely. A beginning. In the end, the story of Micah, Valor, Evan, and Lila reminds us that miracles rarely arrive with thunder or blinding light. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of a loyal dog who refuses to look away, a stranger who steps forward when others hesitate, or a whisper of courage in the heart of a frightened child. Whether you call it fate, divine guidance, or the subtle hand of God, There are moments in life when something greater than ourselves steps in. Moments when darkness is pushed back not only by strength, but by compassion, faith, and the belief that every life, especially the small and fragile, is worth protecting. And in our everyday lives, we all have chances to be part of those quiet miracles. By watching out for the vulnerable, by listening when someone is afraid, by choosing kindness even when the world feels heavy. You never know whose life you might change simply by being attentive, present, and willing to act. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what you felt, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story of courage, loyalty, and the mysterious ways in which grace moves among us. May God watch over you and your loved ones, keeping you safe in moments seen and unseen. And may you always carry the quiet reminder that miracles still walk beside us, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4.